Oh, fantastic. Now, with the proliferation of sort of podcasts, I guess the sort of the audience is more and more coming around to the idea of sort of long form spoken word audio content. The fact that there's sort of so many podcasts available at the moment and so many more people listening to them, and the fact that your phone and other devices like that seem geared towards sort of being able to ingest that content. Do you sort of see the world of podcasts as something that is a challenge to radio as we know it, or something that stations could potentially see as a way of incorporating that, say, into their online audio content?
Absolutely. I mean, podcasts are a great way of building a time machine to make sure that your schedule is not dictating the consumption of your content, and that content that people will seek out will both be available to them out of hours from your regular transmission slot, and will live long into the future, so that when something happens which is newsworthy and that content comes back in, you can give it a longer tail. We don't really talk about podcasters in this particular talk about social, because in one sense I think podcasts are almost a natural extension of broadcasting, and are definitely something you should be doing with at least several of your programs, but they are quite long format, so they are really something that your P1 listeners may end up engaging around that content through a podcast as much as they do. We believe social is a way of taking shorter clips of that,
Right.
And making that shareable and discoverable. So there is a difference. Definitely, feeding the hungry transmitter is the number one thing you should do, and that's where your core audience is, and that's where you serve your core community. Making entire programs or longer segments of programs available as podcasts is a great way of rewarding your listeners and allowing them to listen again, or to listen in comfort at a time of their choosing. And then a social strategy is much more about taking the best moments. I sometimes wonder if podcasts give non-P1 listeners kind of indigestion. I don't insult people's attention span quite as much as people say, oh, people only concentrate for 30 seconds or 2 minutes. I don't believe that's true.
Right.
If the content is good enough, we've seen some quite long clips work quite well. So you don't have to just turn everything into a 7-second Vine clip or something. But I believe there is a different strategy around the platforms that you then put the absolutely best sort of moments on, around Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, and also the way that they are much more discoverable across. So Facebook and Twitter will delight your social audience and will reach them and allow them to share you further. YouTube is a great place to put your video clip because it's so searchable. So when David Bowie dies and you had an interview with him from 3 years ago,
Right.
that interview will resurface then in a way that, again, podcasts, as I say, they're brilliant and they're a great way to consume and to share radio content, but they typically are episodic. People listen to them once and then they move on to the next one. The benefit of social is that it's shareable, as in peer-to-peer, your listeners will share it, and it's discoverable, as in once you've made that clip available on YouTube, don't take it down in 10 days' time. Leave it there. Yes, it'll have a lump of consumption early on as it's most relevant immediately, but then randomly at some point in the future, some news event or something else will happen, and your content then becomes part of the discovery around that. So yeah, a big fan of podcasting, but for slightly different reasons.
Excellent. And so I guess also with this, making sure that your content has a life beyond its initial traditional broadcast, it would also be important for stations to log as much as this interesting spoken word content as possible and have it catalogued there, should there be a need for it to be put on these platforms in the near future. Because, I guess sort of it's a good idea to sort of upload stuff to YouTube and have it there, but who knows what the next big thing is going to be in that one. So I would imagine it's a good idea for stations to archive as much of this material as possible and have it easily searchable in the back end.
Yeah, so we have a product called Virtual Director, which is all about automatic camera switching to automatically make video clips from the studio every time the mics are open. And the idea is exactly that. You don't know when you're going to want to record it. So if you have the Prime Minister come in to your studio, obviously you might put a camera there and record that moment, but you just don't know when you're going to have that perfect telephone call or that, one of the best things about radio is the serendipity of discovering something new or not knowing what's going to happen. So yeah, we say, just visualize and record everything, because you don't know when that moment's going to happen. And in fact, we do some work with BBC Local Radio, and we were actually putting their first virtual director into BBC Oxford. It wasn't even commissioned and turned on. The lights weren't even on properly in the room, and the Prime Minister of the UK phoned in David Cameron just before the Brexit kind of stuff to say that he wasn't going to be standing again at the next election. He's since resigned, but at the time he was just, but that was the first place he'd said it anywhere in the world. He was the local member of Parliament for Oxford, and he said it, phoned into BBC Radio Oxford. We just happened to have the cameras rolling in test because the lights were open, and we turned it on, and that made the national 10 o'clock news as a video clip because, you know, and I'm sure they wouldn't have taken it if it had just been the audio, but because it had some pictures of the presenter, because it was a particularly great piece of content, then we were able to take that. So video clips can, in the news sense, be something which you can share with our TV friends in, you know, local or national news and say, hey, this brilliant thing happened in our station. Here's a pretty high quality video clip of it, you know, and it can then run as part of the national news. But you know, that's not to show off the video reached a long way. It's just to show the power of recording everything that happens, because you just don't know when that call's going to come in.